What's up, everybody? I am Levi with the Veritas 21 podcast. This is SNL Hot Takes again, and I got Samantha Jimenez with me, co-host on this awesome series. We're having really good, engaging conversations, and today we're going to be talking about Christianity in the modern world. What are your challenges? How are you challenged every day with the people that you're around, whether it's your coworkers, family members, friends, and how do we as Christians act in those relationships that we have? Sam, how are you doing, yo?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing good. You know, I went out, I did some vlogging today. I played some golf, which was the first time I did that. Call it host moments. I guess it's just like something where I guess I can get my personality out there, because everybody hears like these really in-depth conversations like you and I are having. And so it's kind of nice, you know, to get out and do something like that where people get to see my other side of my personality, which is I'm a complete goofball. I just say stupid stuff that half the time makes no sense. And so, like, for me to feel a little bit smarter and increase my IQ level, I have to, like, come in here and talk it out, because normally I'm just an airhead. So anyways, yeah.
People want to see both sides to it. So you're giving both sides of who you are. It's not just this, which is I like that. I like that a lot.
Yes. It's always a good time. I guess I say always. It's the first time. A couple things I want to cover, though, at the beginning of this episode is, I'm changing the name of the podcast. Beginning October 1st is going to be a huge change for the platform, changing it to the Pursuing Truth podcast. I think it's more representative of the conversations that we're having here, much like this one. And a lot of people, when they hear the Veritas 21 podcast, they may not understand what Veritas stands for. It stands for truth in the Latin language, so I'm technically not changing much there. But if you ask me, well, what does 21 stand for? It stands for the year that I started the podcast. So nothing creative. And if somebody goes into a search engine and types in a truthful podcast, they're not going to find the Veritas 21 podcast. So this is a good change for the platform. This is going to push it out so that more people will hear these important messages like what we're going to be talking about, Christianity in the modern world. Sam, could you share a little bit about your testimony?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say I think that the move and the name change is a good move. It's only good changes from here on out. I know personally you're going through a season of growth right now, and I know I'm excited for this one, because this conversation is going to really tie into what life has been throwing at you recently, what it's been throwing at me. So yeah, I'll give a short synopsis of my personal testimony. I grew up as a Christian. Actually, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, which is
really?
A branch. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. That shocked me. I did not know that at all. Wow, that's awesome. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, see, this is where all the information's coming out. It's stuff that we haven't even talked about before.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and specifically going to church in Spanish. So I learned the Bible in Spanish. I was going door to door, you know, like you see the stereotypical Jehovah's Witnesses knocking at your door. That was me in Spanish, doing it in Spanish. So I got a really good foundation. I learned a lot. I don't want to say it was all bad, but now in my faith and what I learned on my own, it's completely different. It's actually coming from the Bible. So I grew up Christian, going to church 2-3 times a week, and my parents split up when I was about 13 years old, and from age 13 to when I came back to God, I was age 22 or 23 years old. So it was a good period where I don't want to say I was atheist per se, but I was definitely falling into like Buddhist, New Age, Hinduist ideas. And that just came with me practicing yoga and meditations and chakra, energy cleansing, stuff like that you hear. I was involved in that. So not until I became like 22 years old, I want to say, during COVID, peak COVID, I bought myself a Bible and really just studied the word and became that was the truth. That was the only way that I was going to be able to move forward in the type of life that I wanted to create, not just for myself, but for the people around me that I loved. It was a way for me to express myself to the people who I do genuinely love and care about, people who I want them to know who God is and who Christ is. This gave me a great way, the only way, honestly, that I could have done it. And it was because I went and, God called me to go buy myself a Bible at Barnes & Noble, King James Version. That's all I read is the King James. And it was just, it was there from there on out. It was just no turning back.
Wow. I'm still my mind is rattled by you saying that you were a Jehovah's Witness, because my grandma was actually a Jehovah's Witness, very devout, very involved in the church. And, of course, I was non-denominational growing up all throughout my life, not Baptist, not Methodist, Jehovah's Witness, or anything of that nature. I mean, it was just a complete non-denominational church that I grew up in. And so there was the other side of my grandma, not celebrating birthdays and Christmas. Now, there was a time when they did, before they converted completely over to Jehovah's Witness. But wow, that's just incredible. So when you kind of had your falling out, you said at 13 years old, your parents got a divorce, or they split up for a while?
They split up. Yeah, they split up, and I want to say I was 13 years old, but we just didn't practice anymore. So, if you don't practice something, you're going to lose it. It wasn't something that I felt I needed to, because it wasn't taught to me to really read the Bible that. It was just something that I did. It was just part of my day to day. So, and we did have a falling out with the organization, with the church. So that steered us away from even really wanting to have anything to do with it. So when I got older and into my early 20s, it was something that I chose to do on my own. And I said, you know what, maybe the experience that I had in the church isn't necessarily going to be the same experience that I have in building a relationship with God, not through a church.
Mm-hmm. Because I think that was one thing I found out with my grandma was it was the church was the main thing and not the relationship with God. Everything was about the church and not our personal relationship with God. So when you came back, when you came back to Christ, why didn't you go back to the Jehovah's Witness church? I mean, knowing that that's all you knew in the beginning, what caused you not to go back there?
There were a lot of reasons, but like a lot of other organizations or churches, they're going to look out for their own. And I personally knew a lot of people that had been very hurt, and there were situations that should have been taken more seriously, and the church just wants to handle things internally and not really resolve things. It's more like just sweeping things under the rug. And I mean, that was probably one of the biggest reasons that I had. And it was just something that it wasn't even a question for me, that I didn't even want to go back at all. I would rather just, you know what, the Spirit moves so strong and so quickly that I just knew, you know what, that's okay. I just can be in my room reading my Bible. And that felt so much more powerful. I learned so much more than all of those years biblically than I did when I was going to church 2-3 times a week.
Interesting. And when your parents split up, was that where there was that issue with the relationship with the church in your family? Because I know Jehovah's Witnesses, they'll almost abandon you if say something like that comes up.
Yeah, and it was something that was not handled very well. I think it became very public. My parents split, and even though they did have grounds, my parents did have grounds through the church and through the Bible. You can read the Bible and there are grounds for divorce. So their relationship or their marriage did fall under one of those circumstances. But something happened along the way where the family or the people the children, myself, my siblings, kind of got caught in the middle of the politics that comes with something like that staining your church. Even though there's people, me as a child had nothing to do with the situation that happened between my parents, but I was still affected. And it was just something that my family saw and didn't want to be associated with anymore.
Is there a reason why you went to the King James Bible and maybe not an NIV and JIV and ESV or American Standard?
I looked into it and I prayed a lot about it. I read the 1611, which I know is one of the more controversial Bibles, because not just in the language itself, but the Old Testament being there, the Apocrypha, a lot of books that have been left out of the newer versions of the Bible. And I understood after enough time and research and prayer that I wanted the most authentic version of what there was out there. And if that's what I could get my hands on, they're not necessarily that easy to come by either. So I thought, you know what, that seems to be the right way, rather than something they're just going to kind of sprinkle over, change the language, change the message. I wanted the most authentic, original experience of reading the Word. Because
as the Bible has been translated over the years and updated, I mean, if you think about it, there's probably like 30 different versions of the Bible, or probably far more. I don't even know the answer to that. But there's so many out there, and a lot of times it's just like a simple change of one word that means the same thing. But it's interesting that you say all of that, because I actually read I read two. I have an NIV and I have an American Standard Version. But it doesn't have the Apocrypha and a lot of those other books in those versions. So, but what about the Book of Enoch? Is the Book of Enoch in that?
No, not in this one. I have it separately, but it's not in this one. I'm sure it is in like really old versions that are probably pretty expensive, but I don't have that.
Interesting. I don't know. Like this, it was just also new to me when you broke out the whole Jehovah's Witness thing. So I had to ask you some questions on that. I'll get into my testimony a little bit here. And of course, those of you guys that have listened to the Veritas 21 podcast, you've heard this over and over, how much the last year and a half has impacted me. But my testimony begins when I was really young. Like I said, I grew up in a non-denominational church. I can't remember a time at any point in my life where I had an idea that God wasn't important, even when I was 3-4 years old. So I've always had this zeal to know God, to know Jesus. And I gave my life to Christ when I was 12 years old at a church called Central Christian Church, again, non-denominational. We were very involved, youth group, mission trips, kids camps, everything. And I had some of the best memories as a child being involved in the church. But as I got older, at 10 years old, I lost a brother in a motorcycle accident. And that really made me, I think that's kind of what led me to give my life to Christ at 12 years old. And then I was really into it. Like, I still have the same Bible I had when I was 12 years old. And I have like so much highlighted and all these different things circled. And it's funny now, being older, going back and reading those same verses and remembering what I thought back then about it, and knowing how it applies to my life now as an adult is just like a totally different perspective. You know, it's like grace. I didn't even understand grace. I didn't understand love. I didn't understand mercy. I didn't even understand what manifest meant, and how many times those words are used over and over in the Bible. So now as an adult, I understand those things. But then at 16 years old, I lost the one man that was like my father figure, my grandpa, on my 16th birthday. And that impacted me a lot in that I started making very poor decisions throughout those next few years. You know, I wanted to fit in. I always felt like I didn't fit in. Being in the Christian world, we're called to be separate from the world. But I'm in this school, I'm involved in sports, I'm involved in this world. So it was like, how do I find that middle ground? And so part of me like falling away and making poor decisions with my life and going to parties, drinking, smoking weed, doing other drugs and all of that stuff. And women, that's where like the whole women thing started, you know, and you know, to be quite honest, sex. And everything. I mean, everything that's involved in being a part of the world, I was involved in from 16 to 18 years old. And I remember there was a time when I was 17 years old, and this kind of goes with how important family is in our lives. But at 17 years old, my mom had finally had enough. I was living with my grandma at the time, taking care of her after grandpa had died. And my mom's like, I'm done with this. I'm sending you to a boys' home if you don't come back home with me so that we can get you under control. And I was like, no, screw that. I'm not coming back home with you. And I called my mother every name in the book, everything that your mind can wrap around. She ended up calling the police. I'm so happy my mom stuck to that. She ended up calling the police. I ran. Literally, I was in my truck driving away from the school resource officer, got back to my grandma's house. Boom, a hometown police officer showed up at the house, and I took off running down the street. And he eventually came up to me. He's like, Levi, just come on. Let's just figure this out. Come back with me. So we went back to my mom's house, and that's when I just unloaded all of this poor language and name calling and everything. And my mom's like, yeah, take him to the boys' home. It's called a child in need of care in the state of Kansas. So I went to the boys' home over spring break of my junior year, and I missed out on opportunities to play baseball, and I'd been working all off season, busting my tail. And that really took something out of me because now I'm not able to be involved with my friends. I'm secluded with everybody. When you are a child in need of care or a sink, you aren't allowed to have outside contact from that boys' home because you're in police protective custody. And so I took that week. No, I hadn't completely changed yet, but I did come back with just kind of a renewed sense. I don't want to go there again. It was almost like the miniature jail for me at 17 years old, it seemed like. And I came back, stayed with my mom until I was 18 years old. Then my dad died at the beginning of my senior year. And that was a month before I turned 18. And I was still smoking weed at the time. And I just got to the point where I was just so tired. I was just so tired of living like that. Like it wasn't in my heart. It wasn't in my soul to live like that. And so I met this girl in December of my senior year, and I ended up starting to date her. And I was like, hey, you know what? Here's an opportunity. Here's an opportunity to get my life on track. So I flew up to Pennsylvania to see my brother up there at the time, and I told all of my friends back home, I was like, hey, when I come back, I'm going to be a completely different person. And that's what I did. I came back. I have smoked weed twice since. And those 2 times were in the 9 months following. I have not smoked weed in now almost 10 years, which is just incredible to have that change. But then the following November, like I said, I did all this to my family. I experienced all of those things. And at 18 years old, I'm 19 at the time. It's Thanksgiving. My birthday is actually in a week on September 15th. So, I'm 19 years old. Family's around for Thanksgiving. We always go around the table and say what we're thankful for. And I just broke down. How could somebody that values their family so much be so demeaning and demonstrative towards them, and especially my mother? And that was a humbling moment for many of us, not just me, but my mom, my brothers and sisters, and it mended a lot of things. And I got to experience what that forgiveness was like. And then, to make my 20s in a short synopsis, I was still in that relationship, and she ended up cheating on me. We broke up. I was hopping from relationship to relationship, trying to find validation in the woman. Because remember, when I was 18 years old and I said, you know what, here's my opportunity to change. Yeah, it changed me a little bit, but I wasn't submitting. I was using that energy of that relationship to control the way I was conducting myself in my life. Instead of submitting my life to God, I was submitting my life to the image of living for God, but not fully submitting my heart, my mind, and my soul to God. I still wanted to fulfill myself. So I was hopping from relationship to relationship. And so, fast forward to this last year and a half, it's been times of depression, sad moments, getting into reading and prayer and supplication. And that's when I realized, it was all my ego along the way. It was all me along the way. It was nobody else. It was all me along the way. I experienced things in those relationships. I did things wrong. They did things wrong. And I can pull from that. But the reality is the only person that is in control of our lives is us making the decisions. That's what's awesome about God, is he gave us free will to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And it's important to be able to go back, look at our lives, and take personal responsibility for the things that we experience. And so over the last year, going through depression, and just this renewal, and also running the podcast was, man, I'm chasing validation. I was chasing validation, especially 6 months ago. And now, over the last 3 months, God is just peeling the layers of my heart and like, dude, you're doing this for me. You're not doing it for you. Everything you do with what you have now is because I've given it to you. And so you need to glorify me with that. And that's really how I've been feeling the last couple months. But it's just incredible, there's so much more to all that story, and that's a synopsis of it. I know that was long, but
there's so much, and it's hard to quantify what that means or what that looks like, because as you're saying things, there's things that I'm thinking of. And I think for me, like, the testimony never ends, because it, like you said, it just draws back more memories and more understanding of how we process certain things before, and then I think of it as a before and after, as far as how I would respond being in the world and really operating in the world versus being here but not being of the world. So that, the scripture is beautiful because it puts it so perfectly in a way that I can't explain it, because it's already there and it's already explains it perfectly.
Absolutely. So sharing our personal testimonies, I think that really leads us into, kind of striving for perfection because of those experiences that we had in those imperfect times. And not that we ever will be perfect, but at the times when we didn't bring God into our lives to really take control and trust and have faith in the purpose that he has in our life, we tended, I don't know, Sam, maybe you can like feed into this a little bit, but I've tended not to ever want to go back there. So I just strive to be the best person in my submission to God and giving my whole heart and mind to him.
The way that it makes sense to me is going to be different for you, because coming from a woman's perspective, I understood that in my past, the last thing I wanted was to be like a wife or a mom. I wanted to focus on myself. I wanted to focus on my career. I wanted to, build a big business. And I was thinking about material things. I was thinking about status that would give you, recognition in this world. But what I realized in getting closer to God, it was understanding and accepting that my place personally, not for all women, but for myself, was to be a wife, was to be a mother. And it was a lot of the things that I had neglected before, the things that I had rejected. So for me, it changed because I understood that the way that I can continue to serve God is through preparing myself during my single time to be able to prepare to get to that. And then as things have changed over the last couple of months, over the last 6-8 months, it's now, okay, what can you do with the information that you've learned? What can you do with the plants that you sowed last season? And it's really coming to fruition. And it's really up to each one of us of how we're going to serve God. And that was something that personally I didn't know when I first started in my new walk of faith. I didn't know what that looked like for me. And in a way, I think this is my way of doing it, is reaching more people. And it's kind of a different, way, doing it over online. I didn't see myself doing this. I'm a very private person myself. So this was kind of a surprise to me, but I'm not rejecting it, because I said I had prayed for so long for a way to get myself out there, in the way that God wanted me to, not in the way that I wanted to. I had already asked for that, and it's not fulfilling. I realized that wasn't what I wanted, and sometimes it's going to come in a weird type of way. But that's why you need to have enough discernment and acceptance that if something comes your way, you can really dissect it and see if that's the way to glorify God. And if it's not, then we know we have to keep moving. It's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah, and I really liked what you said. Like, you were so motivated to, have a business, be independent, and, it's almost like it's just the focus of self. And not saying, what, God's going to bless me with whatever he wants me to have, and he takes control of that. So if he blesses me with a business, it's my job, it's my position to honor him through that. But I'm going to go wherever, kind of like what you were saying, like getting behind this podcast, a microphone, talking on TikTok, doing all of those things. That's something that you didn't want to do. And to be quite honest, that was something, especially TikTok, was a place I never thought I would ever be, but I saw the opportunity. I saw that this is where people's minds are at. So I know this is where I need to be, but I'm going into this knowing that I'm doing it for a purpose, and I'm not doing it for attention. I'm doing it so that I can serve God and hopefully bring a message to culture that says something meaningful, because I genuinely believe that this culture right now is like in seek of truth, just something that's foundational, because we're told so many lies in this world, and it's really difficult if you're not walking on that strong foundation with Jesus, to have all of these outside influences coming in, whether that be through TikTok, Instagram, and the anxieties that each one of us experience scrolling through those feeds. All of those things are an attack on our mind, an attack on our spirit. So if we're not solid in our foundation to Jesus, then it's very easy to kind of whittle away and fall away from that. And that's kind of, again, that's where I'm striving for perfection, per se, is that I keep my mind, I keep my heart there. I'm going into this for a reason. I'm going into this for a purpose. The same reason why we were born, essentially. I believe everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a purpose, and there's either a purpose that you're going to choose to live, or there's a purpose that you're going to rely on the faith and rely on God's purpose in your life and glorify him in that purpose. But you have the right to choose. Mm-hmm. I think God wants all of us. God wants every single one of us. He loves each one of us intently. It's the reason why he sent his son to die for our sins. What can we say then? Should we go on saying so the grace may abound? By no means. I just really think about that when talking about even surrendering, our imperfections and giving that to Christ. Look, I am so imperfect. I am like as wretched as anybody out there. It's just the supplication, the surrendering to God and submitting everything about me to him, because I want his purpose in my life, because I figured out what my purpose is, my personal purpose outside of God is. That's pain, that's hurt, that's relying on self and ego and experiencing all of the imperfections. But the only way I deal with the imperfection is the imperfect person inside of me dealing with the imperfection of the world that I see around me. And I don't have anything perfect. I don't have a eternal being guiding me through life. I just got really fired up there, yo. Maybe I
let you go because I love it.
It's just the consequences that I experienced. I think really talking about the depression that I experienced, that I shared in the testimony. I really believe that was a consequence of my life choices. I mean, a lot of people don't like to think about it that way, but really, the depression was because I had regrets, and I hadn't learned to deal with myself yet. I hadn't learned how to deal with myself and submitting it to God. I didn't know how to forgive myself. But I'm an imperfect person. How could I forgive? There's only one person that provides forgiveness, and that's the perfect person. That was Jesus. That was God. He was here for me, to forgive me. And if he can forgive me, if he can forgive you, Sam, if he can forgive anybody in this world, then in the moments where we feel so inadequate and we're anxious and we feel that everybody around us is denying us because of the poor decisions that we've made in life, it really opens up the door through forgiveness that is seen, you know?
I relate to that as well, because our stories are different, but they're really not, because the emotions that we feel are a consequence to our actions. We understand that this world is more spiritual than it is physical. So having depression, having anxiety, those are spirits attacking us because we've opened up doorways, allowing them to come through us. And that's something that we're not really being taught in the modern Christian churches anymore. And unless you're out there trying to understand, why do I feel this way? Why am I acting out this way? And a lot of times it's not necessarily you. We're not made. God didn't create us to have addictions or to have pain. Those are not things that we're born with. Those are things that are a result of us sinning. So being able to be honest with ourselves, it's not about we're being honest with ourselves. It's that we're being honest with God about the fact that we will never be perfect, because we can't do what he did. We can't do what he does or who he is. But as long as we submit ourselves, and for me, it's me submitting myself to God before I can submit myself to a man, because that's something that I hear a lot. I just wanted to say that really quick because I think people get it really mixed up. We need to know who we're submitting to before we submit to the wrong person, and we have to suffer more consequences, and we're in the same cycle of it. So I think it's just about having the patience and understanding of ourselves to know that I know things that I've done wrong, and I'm not going to say, oh, I wish that they never happened, because I actually will say I wish that they never happened, because I had to suffer the consequences, and I still am going through the learning curve of what that looks like for me. So there's only one way for us to get out of that cycle, and it's through the word. It's through God. So there's no other way. And it's not to be judgmental of other people who think that this is inauthentic or that it's harsh. It's just, if you give yourself the opportunity, if you give yourself the chance, it's scary. It's the unknown. If you've never done it before, or if you even have done it before and you're looking for more answers, just give yourself a little window and go to your corner and just believe that there's something out there that you may not know. There's things out there I'm still learning and you're still learning. And that's why it's important for us to stay prayed and stay studying the word so that we can continue to put up a good fight every day. And we're fighting for the people who don't want us to fight for them. We're fighting for the people who say harsh things to us or think that we're weak for believing in God or having a belief in something bigger than us. So we do it for the other people, not for ourselves. So I'm just really glad that, we're having this conversation, because I don't think it's being said.
Yeah, there was a quote that I heard the other day that said, for a woman, have your heart so guarded and your focus on Jesus that a man has to focus on Jesus to attain you, essentially. Something along those lines. Because that's one thing I've really been talking about. Of course, the TikTok has always been about dating, and I haven't really glorified God through my perspective of dating. A lot of times is from my resentment of women, because I just find it difficult to have real, authentic conversations with a lot of women. I think a lot of men and women struggle with that in establishing relationships. It's like people can't have real conversations anymore, and it is extremely difficult. But that's also where I think this, like I said earlier, like this desire for truth, a desire for real conversations comes from, because it's something that people are relating to that can't find relationships in such a divided and polarized culture right now, where when you come and you confidently speak the truth, and this is why, and hitting on what you said about being involved in God's word and guarding our minds, guarding our hearts with God's word, and this is really where it puts up that wall, and somebody that can foundationally come in and speak with confidence on what they know to be the objective truth. A lot of people would say that this truth that we are talking about right now is our subjective truth. This is personal truth to us. And Sam, I don't know, you said that you experienced Hinduism, Buddhism, or you were kind of flirting around those edges. What were your experiences with that? Like, did it feel real? Did it feel like it was you? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it's very powerful. You know, the law of attraction is a big thing that's becoming very popular. So I'm going to try and relate it to the popular methods that I see people using on social media and everything. And it does work. It is powerful. These things do have power. These spiritual worlds that we like to mess with, those are very real. I don't want to say that they were all fake. No, a lot of these things are very real. But the thing is, you have to be careful with what you're doing. People say, oh, these are good spirits, or you're opening up doorways for things to happen. And we don't have any power over them being quote unquote good or quote unquote bad. They don't care who opens up this doorway to let you in. And I'm speaking from experience. There are things that I did in like the spiritual realm that now, I mean, I had to really repent for those things that I did, because at the time I didn't understand what I was doing. And it was things that were happening around me. There were physical things that were happening around me as a result of what I was doing. So I'm not going to say that they're not real, because they are. But if you are doing them, you're connecting with a spiritual realm. And if you think that God is not above that, then you're not gonna have to answer to me. You're gonna have to answer to God, and I'm just trying to get people to understand what that is, how dangerous it is.
That is so good what you were saying, like the spiritual warfare. Like a lot of times, there are people. A lot of people are just like, you know what? I just want to kind of like stay right here in the middle ground and walk this fence, but realizing like eventually you're going to get tired walking on this balance beam per se. You're going to get tired walking down that. And eventually you're going to fall one way or the other. And to also understand there's one side over here telling you this, and there's another side over here telling you this. And that's the war that you're in, is eventually you're going to get tired and you're going to fall on one side or the other. And so, yeah, me and Sam may be over here on the Jesus side per se and saying like, this is the only truth. Like, come on guys, I love you. I want what's best for you. I want you to experience that grace. I want you to experience that mercy. And I love you. I want you to be here with me and experience the joy that I get to see now. That's us over here talking. Whereas the world is over here talking, and the world's like, well, here, listen to this. Here, watch this. Here's some pornography for you. Here's some music that is just depressing and keeps you in your feels and your emotions and into yourself. And then you got this self-love like pushing on you all the time. You got all of these things that are telling you like, it's okay to be you. It's okay that your emotions are the way they are. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And no. Like, that's the true spiritual battle. It's like we are in a 100% imperfect world. And one day we're going to be tired and we're going to fall one way or the other. And I think that's why, you know, it's never too late. Here's the thing. The thief on the cross, right? Jesus told him, you have been forgiven. but it's genuine. And in no way, and I think this is part of being a true Christian, there's a difference between proclaiming to be a Christian and being somebody that wants to live for Jesus. Those are two completely different things. It's nice in a popular world of say the American culture is a Christian culture per se, or foundationally Christian. And it's easy for anybody to say, well, I'm a Christian, and I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to, just lay that out on the table because it's really something to think about. But Christianity is just like thrown out there. And it's almost like the Christian, I almost don't even like the Christian word per se because of that. Like, it's almost like, yo, this is Jesus. I'm just here for Jesus, But yeah, I just really wanted to hit on that spiritual warfare that you were talking about because it is so true. The attack, and I didn't even get into all the details of the different attacks, and probably even some of my subjective opinions on that. Like when I talk about self-love, there's a lot of people that won't disagree or that won't agree with me on that. But I just really think it's not about loving self. It's about loving others. That's what Jesus calls me to do.
Something also, before I forget, that every single day we're called as Christians, right? I agree with you. I don't like saying Christians, but to the outside world, we're going to be the only representations of a good Christian. That's what my hope is. That's what I aspire to. So I'll say, yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'll identify what I believe and how I have difference of opinions with a lot of modern Christian churches, because you can find witches and you can find every type of sect of people within the Christian church in today's America. So I'll distinguish myself, but I wanted to say that every single day we're called to pick up our cross and keep going. So I don't want people to think that we're being judgmental or that we're being too critical of other people, because I personally am hypercritical of myself, because I would really, really feel horrible about leading somebody in the wrong direction by me saying something and not following it through myself. It's almost like this is a responsibility now, because I'm here and you're here, putting ourselves on the line to say, you know what, this is what I believe. And I'm not going to say that it's super difficult or anything, because this is what I chose. I chose to do this. But I will say, and I'll be honest, that that keeps me accountable to doing what I say I'm going to do. And if I'm not going to do something, I'm not going to do it. And just staying true to what is the most authentic version of serving God through whatever way I'm able to.
Do you think that that's a struggle with being an evangelical Christian and going out and talking about Jesus? Is like, you are imperfect, and kind of like take the plank out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Yo, that's so true. And that goes into authenticity. I think that's why it's important. I've said it and I'll say it again. Yo, I struggle with cussing all the time. That's not even the worst sin I struggle with. But that's an example that all of you guys have seen on the podcast. There's been times where, I throw out an F-bomb or I throw out a B word. Now I've changed that. I've got that under control, but that's still there. And if you want to find it, if you want to watch it, it's FYF. I'm not perfect, but it's FYF. Be courageous. I probably threw out 40 F-bombs in about 35 minutes. And I still struggle with that. But I tell you what, even being out golfing today, and watching the vlog that I made, I'm like, man, I didn't cuss there. Wow, that's different than. And I was just being authentic, I was just being real. It's not like I was trying to control my language. It's that the last few weeks, I've been waking up an hour or two before I go to do anything. And I've been reading through Proverbs and submitting myself and praying. And that's one thing that I've been praying about a lot. I'm like, God, fix this tongue. Fix this perverse language. Because it's not that I'm doing that to look good to the world. I'm doing that because That's Proverbs talks about that all the time. Proverbs talks about the perverse tongue all the time. So going out into this world and talking like that is a false display of God. And so, you know, me talking about this right now is just me just purely being authentic on that level. But also, like I said, with my testimony, I've had sex outside of marriage, and I struggle with that in the dating world right now. Sometimes, you know, I think it'd be nice to have a woman over right now laying in my bed and having sex. Like, just being blunt, okay? I struggle with that because I want it too, because sex is awesome, it feels good. But God calls us to do it in his timing. God calls us to do that with the woman that he has for us. He calls you as a woman to do it when the right man comes, and be married to him and fully devoted to him, because this is something special. This is something where the two souls, the two spirits connect. And sex isn't necessarily supposed to be this raunchy thing. It's supposed to be a beautiful thing in the right context. And in this culture where it's just constantly shoved down our throats, whether that's through movies or songs, just Nicki Minaj popped up in my head. I don't know why Nicki Minaj popped up in my head, but these lyrics that are just filling our minds with the idea of having sex. That's working on my heart, making me even want it more, because then I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds hot. Watch the music video. There's booty bouncing. Blah, 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 blah. Like it's seriously working on me. And I think that's important. You hit on such a good topic there. That is so stinking good. So how do you go ahead? Sorry.
The idea of it can be so overwhelming, of you living a certain type of way, not you, but like anybody living a certain type of way, and then realizing that, let's just say smoking, for example, because I used to smoke a lot. And
like tobacco or weed?
Weed.
Okay.
I was a pretty into partying and raving. That was my previous life. And so, there's a certain type of lifestyle that's involved with that. And when I started to realize that, I looked into the scripture myself, and I said, well, why shouldn't I be doing that? I want to be sure of what I'm doing before I do it. So I looked into it, and it was honestly it was scary, because it was a dependency that I had. I don't care what people say. You can still be dependent on it, even though it's legal. Just look into it. That's all I can say.
Like if your thought is, I got to smoke weed because of my anxiety, you're saying, well, I don't got to focus on God for my anxiety. I think that's an important way to look at it. And look, okay, I've smoked weed. Okay, I mean, just being straightforward, I still smoke tobacco here out of this little cancer stick. And I'm working on that. I want to get over that. But that's something I've been doing for 12 years. So I've relied on that when I am anxious. I'm sorry. Go ahead and continue. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. So it can be like a daunting thing to have to overcome. And it seems like this huge mountain. But when you really focus on what you're doing it for, it was like, for me, one day to the next, it was just completely gone. I had no desire for it. This is over 2 years ago, the last time that I did. So I've never felt that need to want it anymore. I don't have that desire whatsoever. So there are some things that we have to leave out of our hands, and we have to put it into God's hands. And if that's the first time somebody would be asking for forgiveness for doing something, or having an addiction to something, it could be anything. It could be food. It could be anything. So if you are willing to just take a chance, I'm sure that you're not gonna be led astray.
Right. And I should really kind of tone back what I said about marijuana. I don't quite have a stance on marijuana. I used to be really, really against it. And right now I just kind of don't have a stance, and to approach it more gently, per se, to correct myself. it just goes with anything in life, anything in moderation. It's something that I think that we all should be aware of is, am I replacing this one thing? It could be the sex, it could be the music, it could be the video games, it could be the movies, it could be the podcasts that you listen to all the time. Are you replacing those things to make you feel better, but still longing and having a desire for something more out of something like that? So yeah, I just wanted to relate that with everything, because I'm very staunch about a lot of things. I'm very pinpoint and straightforward, and God calls us to be that way. We're called to be straightforward, but that doesn't mean that's all we are. It's important that we learn to have relationships, and one of the most important things about relationships is communication. So when communicating about things like that, it's important that we effectively communicate that with a humble spirit, humbled mind, and heart, that we approach a conversation like that. And obviously, I am not perfect in that. Definitely not. And you guys catch it now, too. There's probably been a few times you've been listening to Sam and I talk throughout the last hour or however long we're into this, which I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation right now, Sam.
Yeah, me too.
But there's been probably a couple times where you're like, Levi, quit interrupting. Levi, listen better. And it's 80% listening, 20% talking. Naturally, when I get behind the microphone and I got all these lights on in here and I got all this stuff going and I get so focused, and then I'm like, I get anxious, like, oh, what do I say next? How do I like move around that Jackie Chan, that conversation, I don't know. So I get anxious, and it's just like, tone it back. Just let it be. It's cool. It's whatever. Let's talk about relationships. And I'm not going to edit any of this out. I mean, this is just like the real part of it, us having the conversation. I do a lot of editing, and I think editing kind of takes away from the authenticity. And so I'm actually going to try to be just more authentic with it, and just show you guys, hey, it's not like this is perfectly curated. It's really not. It's I have no clue. I'm sitting here thinking out playing golf today. I'm like, man, how's this conversation going to go today? I have no clue. It's just wherever it's led, it's just yeah. There's times when, I know there's been a few times now, I'm trying to figure out how to close up something, and I'm just wow, I'm a fool. but no, I'm not perfect. And anytime getting behind this microphone, and Sam, you and I have talked about this, talking about these things, we're growing. It's essentially practice, and it's perfecting an art. Honestly, there's just things, it's difficult. But yeah, let's talk about relationships.
We're both trying to just get forth our best efforts, just getting closer to God and getting closer to, getting married. The goals that we have, the spiritual goals that we have, we're chipping away a little bit at a time. So just like that with anything else, we're here, we're having a good conversation about hopefully things that people connect with. I think people will. I think people are going to enjoy this, because if they're having as much fun listening to it as we are having the conversation, right. A lot of time goes into this, and a lot of thought and prayer goes into us doing this. It's not something that just gets thrown together. So it's something that we take a lot of pride in it. So I think it's a fruitful experience for both of us.
It's difficult if we're relying on ourselves the whole time to do this. And we're constantly in that battle all the time in that battle. Let's talk about being unequally yoked with the partner. This is such a stinking important topic to talk about. What are your thoughts on it?
It's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Both parties need to be honest, and it's I don't see it talked about enough either. And I think there's a lot of confusion too to what that really means. I think can you explain what that means to you, or what your understanding is?
So my understanding of being equally yoked together that means that the woman that I am supposed to be with, let's say if there's a person meant for me, that person loves Jesus just as much as I do and has completely submitted their life to Jesus. That everything they do wrong inside of the relationship is submitted to God before it's submitted to me as a husband, and vice versa, husband to God, husband to wife, maybe like the triangle, you know?
Right.
And so I think that's where being an equally yoked partner is. I've been in every relationship I've been in. We weren't praying together. We weren't in God's word together. We weren't going to church on a consistent basis together. Christ was like a nice idea. Christ was like a second option per se. You could almost say like Christ was a second option, but we as partners, as a relationship, we're going to do what we felt fulfilled in our relationship to do, instead of submitting the relationship to God and honoring God in our relationship to one another. And I think that's so stinking important when talking about in this dating world, to go out into the dating world, and this makes it so much more difficult, okay? Because it is not popular to be a Christian in today's world at all. It's probably the most unpopular thing that you can do is to give your life to Christ. It's like the more sanctified I feel, the more joy that I experience in my relationship with Christ, the more I feel persecuted from the outside world. And it's like, really, everything that I want to get out of this relationship with God is everything that's good for everybody around me. But everybody around me is like, who is Levi? Like, what's happened to him? He's weird. He's crazy. He's wild. And now it's just like, yo, I proudly proclaim. You ever hear that song that goes, Jesus freak? How's that go? I want to sing it for you guys. How's that go? What will people do when they find out I'm a Jesus freak? You remember that song? You've never heard that? Oh my gosh, I'm going to send it to you after this. It's awesome. But yeah, seriously, I mean, it does make the dating world a lot harder because you're looking for that other person. It's just another stipulation for finding a relationship.
And it's something that people really need to take into consideration, because it's not popular to go to church, but you have to have the discernment to know that there's a difference between somebody who goes to church every Sunday and wears a cross and somebody who's actually living that way. So you can say you're with somebody who is a Christian, but if you haven't really broken down what their values are, what their direction is, where they're trying to go, not so much where they've been. I think that a person's past is important to take into consideration, but if you have goals that have yourself aligned with God and Christ, and the person that you're with isn't on the same page as you, it doesn't really matter if they call themselves a Christian or not. There's extremely different values that come with somebody who could just slap a label on it because they want to have that, because you do get a certain type of environment. You get to be around these great people who are Christians, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful having a group and having people that believe the same thing as you. But if you're willing to put yourself on the line in a relationship that you want to lead to a marriage, both people need to be very honest about what that looks like and what each person's responsibility is going to be in it.
You're dealing with an imperfect person that's not submitting themselves to the perfect being. So if they're not submitting themselves to the perfect being, then the only person they can submit to is either themselves or the person beside them. And if the person beside them is also imperfect, then they're still submitting to the imperfection. It just is a circle of imperfection. And so the only reliance to find perfection is through Jesus. It's just the only thing that makes sense. And like, you may have a partner that's going to cheat on you. You may have a partner that speaks down to you, that emotionally abuses you. What's stopping him from doing it if he's only relying on his own ego, if he's only relying on himself? Nothing's stopping him. Nothing's stopping him. And he may love you. He may love you. But what's the love verse say? What is that? Galatians 5:22. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, and it just goes on. I mean, there's so many things to the love verse, but seriously, it's so important that you find an equally yoked partner that submits themselves to God first before they'll ever submit to you. And I think that's important. And I like what you hit on, Sam, that, examining their past. If they've given it to Christ, you can't hold their past against them because Christ has forgiven them. You can't hold that against them. There's so many other dynamics that come in, whether that's kids, divorces, blah, blah, the list could go on. But without getting into all of those details, we really need to look at people with the level of grace that God has for us, that he has forgiven them. It is my role to forgive them as well and be open to it, because it's more important that I'm equally yoked to a partner and not submitting myself to an unequally yoked partner that has all the other attributes that I want in a relationship that's going to lead me down a road drawn further away from Christ. Whew. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good conversation, Sam.
I'm really enjoying this.
Me too. This was good. Do you think there's any other topics that we should hit on with this one, or?
I think we could go on for a long time. There's so many things, but you know what? I'm going to be honest. I think this is something that we're going to maybe need a part 2 on, because I'm thinking of so many other things that people can relate to.
Absolutely. So what are some of your thoughts on the next one? Just kind of give an idea of what may be to come.
I think we could share what that looks like, that transition, and kind of separating yourself from an old life or old actions that we may have gone through, letting go of guilt or resentment towards others. Forgiveness. I think forgiveness could be a whole topic in itself. The patience and understanding to forgive others that don't want or don't deserve our forgiveness. But we're not doing it for them. We're doing it for the healing and for the glory of God, because he's forgiven us. So we can't hold others to the things that they don't know yet, the things they haven't realized yet. But I mean, my mind is kind of racing right now as far as things that we could talk about, because it's so deep and there's so many layers to it and it never ends.
Really? Yeah, I know. We could do a 17-hour podcast and you guys would just be like, when are these people going to sleep? But we could. It is so deep. I hit on mercy. We hit on grace. We hit a little bit on forgiveness. We hit a little bit on relationships and how that impacts and all of those things. That is each one of those topics is a onion in and of itself. To peel back the layers of that would just be so time consuming, and so much information can be provided on that, and testimonies and different things. And I think that would be great, if we maybe talk about forgiveness on a part 2. I know Sam and I will be praying about what we need to do next on the next episode. If that's where we're led, that might be the next one, or it might be 3 hot takes later that we're talking about forgiveness, and this is like the episode that was promised to you, and episode 49 of the Veritas 21 podcast. And Sam, any last thoughts before I start running down rabbit trails with all my ADHD?
No, as usual, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that TikTok has given us a platform for us to build relationships and meet other people. I'm loving the feedback that people have. So if you guys are listening or watching, reach out, let us know what you guys think, because I would love to hear what you guys think, and any new ideas or commentary that you may have. I think I would really appreciate.
Absolutely. Like, reach out, leave a comment. And I mean, even if you're just like, yo, Levi, you're a complete idiot, you should quit. All right, I'll take that with a grain of salt, you know. Or if you're like, man, that really touched me today, let us know, because that's encouraging to us. You know, it's not like we come in here with no purpose behind this. And so, you know, hearing that is an encouragement to us that the conversation that we had played an impact on you. And then hearing also, you know, what you think could be done better, then also tells us, like, don't hold any of it back. Like, it's so important to, for us, being influencers. Gosh, I can't believe I fit in that category at 28 years old.
I know.
I'm too old for this. But seriously, you know, be real, be raw, be open. That is like my philosophy. If it's negative feedback, if it's positive feedback, share it with us so we know what type of direction to go. Or if you think that there was a topic that we hit on that we need to dig in much deeper because theologically or our doctrine is off or something along those lines, share it with us. My ears are open. They are not shut off to anybody. And I read every single message I get on Instagram. I read every single email that I get on the podcast. And I think only 3 or 4 of you guys have sent me an email at some point in time in a year and a half, which is pretty awesome that I still check it every single day, because I'm like waiting for somebody to have a conversation with me about it, because that this is for you. This isn't for me. This is for you. And so just all glory to Jesus and the way that he's worked on me, how he's worked on this podcast, how he's worked in people's lives. You know, I have some awesome people that have reached out to me and left me very encouraging words that just, and I see even, it's crazy. I see how it's playing out in their life. And it's just awesome to kind of see that influence. And it's not glory to me, it's glory to God for the way that God is working through me to give you guys this level of authenticity and real conversations that are truthful, raw, authentic, and I'm going to keep it real with you guys. So, go give Sam a stinking follow on Instagram. Go give her a stinking follow on TikTok.
Yeah, if you're not on Instagram and you're only on TikTok, get me on there. If not TikTok, then Instagram. I'm more active on TikTok, but you'll find me on Instagram too.
Seriously, she's like content galore over there. She literally posts something like probably 3 or 4 times a week at least. I mean, there's times when she's like every day. Well, your Instagram story, you post something nearly every day.
No, well, you know what? I think it's funny that you said influencer earlier, because same thing. I'm like, no, I'm just me. I'm doing my thing. And I'm not the type of person that's going to just put content out. You and I have had this conversation. I'm not going to put content out for follows. I'm not going to put content out for likes and engagement. That's not what this is about. And if I feel like there's days where I just don't feel like filming, or I don't feel like nothing needs to be said, I'll let somebody else say it, because it's not about the clout that social media brings, and you got to be careful about who you listen to, the content that you're watching. And I don't want to contribute to the influx of negative content that's coming through. So yeah, sometimes I'm active and sometimes I'm not, because I'm not trying to be an influencer. I'm trying to be me and spread the message. And
that's really an act of God that between you and I think there's probably over 36,000 followers across our social medias. And it would be very easy to be egotistical about that, or look at ourselves better than other people. And this isn't to give glory to us, but the way that God has worked in our lives to want to glorify God through those platforms. And I think that that's also important to say, as there's a lot of people that want to be influencers. And I always say it like that, there's got to be a purpose with it, because you don't want that ego to take control of you. So anyways, guys, go over, give the Veritas 21 podcast a follow on Instagram, please. Trying to build that account to 1,000 by December. Also trying to get the YouTube channel up to 1,000 by next August. I will have a website launching, and I want to say December, but it's coming, And there's going to be a way that you guys can show support for this message. just give back a little bit and show the podcast, you know, a little bit of support. This has involved a lot of money to build this, and that will give you guys a way to maybe buy t-shirts. I may partner up with some authors and sell some books, sell something on there. But that's coming down the road. And so go follow us on Facebook as well. That's really where I do blogging per se right now. Is every day I share a post, or I say something about what's going on with the podcast. So that's really where you're going to get all of the information of what's to come with the podcast. Go over and give a Apple Podcast review. This is the most important thing you can do. Don't even follow me on anything. Just leave an Apple Podcast review, and I'm completely content at that point. But leave an Apple Podcast review, as that will increase the analytics to get important messages like what Sam and I are sharing right now out to people that need to hear this. And guys, I love all of you. God bless. I'm praying for you. I know Sam's praying for you as well. Praying that this message touched your heart today and got you really thinking about maybe what your position is. So grace be with all of you guys. Love you, and God bless.